Hello everyone, this is Agrita Rahman. Welcome to the show Meet the Global Leader. This is an initiative by School of Entrepreneurship Development. Under this initiative, we invite many skilled professionals, leaders, consultants, journalists, and entrepreneurs. Today we have with us an accomplished journalist with years of experience producing informative and impactful work with a passion for uncovering the truth and sharing important stories. Please welcome Jessica Madid.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome, Jessica. So, my first question to you is: we always stay curious about the person who are succeeding in the particular field they're working in. So, can you tell us about your background and how you got into journalism or writing?
Yeah, it took me a really long time to get into journalism. So at university, I studied arts and law, but I didn't want to practice law. And I then did not know what to do with my life. So I went traveling through Asia for 1 year. And then by the time that ended, I realized that I really wanted to be a journalist. And I thought, how can I find out how to be a journalist in London? So I did an accreditation course to become a newspaper journalist. And then I had the qualification and I couldn't get the job. I just kept getting unpaid internships at local newspapers in London. So I thought I either had to give up on becoming a journalist or I could do something a little bit drastic. So I found a newspaper in Bangladesh called the Daily Star. I found it on Wikipedia and thought, okay, great. It's an English language newspaper. I found the editor's email address and I emailed him and asked if I could come for a 6-month internship. And I got such a big surprise when he wrote back and said, yeah, you can come. So I moved to Bangladesh in 2009 and I did the 6-month internship. And before the internship had even finished, I was offered a full-time job at the Independent newspaper, also in Dhaka. And I ended up living in Bangladesh for 3 years. And from there, I moved to Myanmar and I lived there for 4 years. And in 2016, I came back to Australia and have continued working as a journalist.
Your passion for this work is truly inspiring. So, how do you come up with ideas for your stories or books?
Well, I write only nonfiction, so everything is true. I wrote this book, which is about my life in Myanmar. It's called Our Home in Myanmar. And I'm currently working on my second book, which is another travel memoir about the year that I went traveling from. I started in Cambodia and I went overland, Southeast Asia, China, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. And that's my second book. And then my third book will be about living in Bangladesh for those 3 years. Because I love to travel, I love different cultures, and so many interesting things happened that's what I'm most motivated to write about. And then with my journalism, it's a combination of technology and business. So it sometimes the editors come to me with the idea because it's what people want to read about. And sometimes I look around for something that I'm really interested in, and then I pitch that idea to the editor. And if it suits the publication, then they say yes.
Okay. So, can you share some insights about Dhaka? You lived in Dhaka for 3 years. So,
Yeah.
how experience?
It was amazing. I had such great friends. I started out living in Motijil, really busy, and I would take like a rickshaw or a CNG to Karan Bazaar because that's where the Daily Star office used to be. And I had such good friends. The people were so kind and so friendly to me. We would start work quite late in the evening and finish at about 11 o'clock at night. And we'd always go up to the tea room for like samosas and cups of tea. And I became really good friends with the people that I worked with. I ended up marrying my translator. So I married a Bangladeshi man. We were doing a story I was doing a story for the Scotland Herald on the garment girls of Dhaka. So there'd been a lot of protests about the minimum wage and I needed a translator. And so he met me out the front of a garment factory on Love Lane in Tejgaon.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So can you walk us through your writing process from idea to publication?
For a book or for an article?
For a book.
For a book, well, it takes a very long time. So I could tell you about the book I'm writing now, and it took place a long time ago. I was 25 years old. It was 2006, and all my diaries got thrown away by a really mean flatmate that I had in London. So when I moved to Bangladesh, he put all my stuff out on the side of the street when I didn't come home. So I lost 20 years of my diaries, which had all the notes I'd taken for my trip. So I was really upset. However, my father saved every email that I sent him, and he saved it to a folder. And when I came back to Australia 10 years later, he gave me the USB drive, and I put it into the computer, and it was 80,000 words of emails. So I had all this recollections. And then I also, so because this took place a long time ago, I have to reconstruct it. So with enough detail, because I won't make anything up. If I can't remember, then I just can't include it. But what I can also do is I can reconstruct it using technology. So I go online, I go to Google Maps, and I have also bought all the this is the Lonely Planet Vietnam that I used in 2006. This is the 2006 edition. So I got these all secondhand. So I use information from this, Google Maps, to remind me of what the places looked like, where I was, so I can put in the address and that kind of thing. And I've also got friends from my travels who I'm still friends with today. And I've asked them to send me their memories of, like, there was a mugging that happened in Vietnam. So I contacted both the people that were there and the girl who got mugged and kind of recreate it like that. And then, of course, I have really strong memories because it was like the best year of my life. So I find that what we remember is like what's most important to us on an emotional level. Like, we forget the details and the numbers and the time of day, but we remember how we felt, and you never really forget that, the way that somebody made you feel. So my book is, it's a travel book, but it's also like my journey as a young woman. I had no idea what I wanted to do in my career because I didn't want to do law, but I didn't know what else to do. And my parents were really worried about me. But I was walking around behaving like a journalist, asking all these questions and looking at, different countries with a lot of curiosity. And through those experiences, I realized, I had this realization, I wanted to be a journalist.
I see. So you visited so many countries, and you have been exposed to so many cultures. So do you have any particular culture that you like the most?
No, I don't really have a favorite, but I mean, I love all the different experiences that I have had. I mean, when I lived in Myanmar, that was really interesting because it's a country that had been isolated from the rest of the world for 50 years because there was this military dictatorship. There was hardly any tourists. All the people that could leave Myanmar, had left. There was no international media. There was no international movies. There was no mobile phones. There was hardly any internet. So Myanmar has, and when I arrived in 2012, this was beginning to be unwound. So I worked at a local newspaper there. We were allowed to publish the newspaper daily because it was a private newspaper. And so the culture was really strong because it was like the country had been frozen in time. So there were like Buddhist monks and nuns, like, walking around the street, and these nuns, the women, they have, shaved heads and pink robes with like orange sashes. And in the mornings they go out with an alms bowl and they collect rice and people give them offerings. And the monasteries would like play this really beautiful music, sometimes all through the night. And they had these festivals called like the Festival of Lights, and people would walk along like with candles or torches and that kind of thing, and like bang a drum. And so like in some countries you have to go and look for the culture, but in Myanmar the culture was everywhere. So it was extraordinary to see that. And women have hair down to like their knees and stuff, and most women wear traditional dress. Like it's very popular in Bangladesh, but even more so in Myanmar, the lungi that they wear, and the men wear the lungi too, whereas most men in Bangladesh wear trousers. But I also love Bangladeshi culture, and I loved the food in Bangladesh, and I loved the friendliness of people. People in Myanmar are very shy, whereas people in Bangladesh, to me, were more like friendly and confident and really curious about the world. So I would have really amazing conversations with all my colleagues at the Daily Star. And just, it's a very intellectual culture. Like I became friends with the man who did the literature pages of the newspaper, and everybody in Bangladesh reads a lot of books, and I loved those aspects of the culture as well.
Great. So how do you balance your own voice and perspective with the need for objectivity in journalism?
Well, that's a good question. It's something you learn through training. Bad journalism is when I allow my feelings to color the way I report an article. And I genuinely believe that the facts are the most interesting part of anything. So there's no need for me to include my own opinion of the person that I'm interviewing or of the situation. It is, I speak to experts and I get their views, and my goal is to find people who have different views, but they're all very respected in their field, and then to give it to the reader who then thinks, gee, this is a really complex situation. What's the main takeaway from this? So I like to just find the most interesting, compelling research that makes you think about something in a different way. And so my opinion about that is not relevant or interesting, you know?
Okay, I see. So can you describe a particularly memorable or impactful story or book that you have worked on and how it affected you?
I did a story for the BBC last year, which was about, have you got a lost twin? So there was a scientific breakthrough that made it possible to do a test. So I could do a test on you right now as an adult that would tell me whether you began your life as an identical twin inside your mother's womb. And this is far more common than people realize. And why is it important? Some people go through their life having a sense that they had a twin. And to have this confirmed would tell them so much about, you know, why they've had this strange feeling. One of the scientists that I interviewed has had dreams when he was a child that there was another child lying in the cot with him in the bed, another, like, just a kind of shadowy identical twin. So he is very soon going to be able to find out whether we retain that knowledge on some kind of level. But from a health point of view, if you were an identical twin, there's a higher prevalence of some genetic disorders, things like cerebral palsy. And so this could lead to a discovery in a cure for cerebral palsy. So it's really a remarkable scientific breakthrough. And since that story was published, I've had quite a lot of people contact me from all around the world saying that they're sure they have a twin and they just want to find out if they have a twin. So I know that this is, you know, it's quite an emotional reaction that people get to it, and it's just fascinating.
It is. And it is really interesting.
Really interesting.
So how do you decide which stories to pursue and pitch to editors or clients?
I'm usually working on one story, and then somebody that I'm interviewing tells me something really, really interesting that is not within the focus, or, you know, a journalism article is really short. Maybe I've got like 800 or 1,000 words. but they'll say something to me and I'll think, wow, that's amazing. And then I'll just park that idea. I'll finish the story and then I'll go and chase the other story.
And how do you manage your time and prioritize your workload as a freelance journalist?
This will sound funny, but I have alarms going off all through my workday. So I had an alarm before this call started. I had it 10 minutes before, and then I'll have 2 minutes before. So 10 minutes before means kind of get all the paperwork together if I'm doing a phone interview or something. Make sure that, I've got your questions are here. I can see my notes and everything. I've got water, all that kind of stuff. And then 2 minutes before means like get online. And if I'm writing an article, like today I'm writing 2 articles, and if I'm under really tight time pressures, I'll set an alarm every hour to stop me freaking out. So the alarm will go off at every hour during the day, and I'll be like, okay, my progress is okay. I'm getting closer. And that kind of calms me down instead of constantly looking up at the clock and thinking, I won't be able to do it, because I have to make every deadline. I'm a freelance journalist. If I don't meet a deadline, my editor won't use me again, because they need me to provide the content at the time, because they have to put it on the internet or the website. It could be a disaster for them if I don't file. So, and I also have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'll show you a photo. That's them.
They're very cute.
Yeah. So I have to pick them up from daycare. And when they're at home, I have to supervise them. I can't, they're too little. So I have to stop working. So deadlines for me makes me work really, really productively. I just can't waste time.
Amazing. So how do you measure the success of your work as a freelancer?
The fact that I get work is the success enough, because I wanted to be a journalist so much and I couldn't get paid work. I was only allowed to work for free. And when I can pay all my bills with my writing, I can, look after my daughters and everything. And that, to me, that's enough. Like because it got to the point where I thought, I'm never going to be able to be a journalist. I'm never going to get to write a book. I decided that if I got to do it as my full-time job, not a hobby, that would be success. So I love writing for like big publications like Forbes and BBC, and talking to, some of the people. It makes me nervous to talk to them because they're so respected. That, to me, that an editor will trust me to speak to that person. Like this morning, I spoke to the vice president of Microsoft, who's visiting Sydney. She's the vice president of security and privacy. And if my editor trusts me to represent the magazine and to speak to her, I'm really happy.
Great. So how do you see the role of journalism or writing in society, and how has it changed in recent years?
Well, I think the internet has been really good for journalism. A lot of people think, there's so much clickbait and there's so much silliness. And when we moved to the 24-hour news cycle, instead of just getting a newspaper once a day in the morning and that was it, now, people are hungry for content and people want to read so much more. So, and, I love writing for the Forbes website. I interview someone, I send it to my editor. It could be up the next day. Sometimes it's up the same day, because I don't do breaking news. I do features. With a magazine, it can be 3 months, by which time the situation may have changed. So the information is not as up to date. So I think that's really good, but I think there's still a lot of journalism is still a crime in way too many countries, and especially in Myanmar. So the newspapers where I work, they've closed down. And that's really terrible, because I think a healthy society has a freedom of press and freedom of expression. And it's such an important role. And if you're not allowed to have a vibrant media that can disagree with each other, it's just not good for us as humans, I think.
I agree. So how do you handle feedbacks or criticism from editors or clients?
Well, I'll just be honest. I mean, I take it to heart. Because I take a lot of pride in my work. I think I'm motivated a lot by fear. I would hate to send an article that my editor didn't like. So I do put a lot of effort into all my articles because I'm scared. But if they do have criticisms, I turn it into an opportunity, or they want more than what I've given them. I then try to do that as quickly and as well as I can so that they're happy with the way that we work together. And then they'll continue to use me as a freelancer. If I take a long time to reply to their email and I drag my feet and I just won't provide that extra stuff, it's a bad way of doing business. So I just try to be efficient. And then, like with my book, I had someone write a really, really mean review of my book on a really popular website in Myanmar. And that did hurt my feelings, but he was so aggressive that in the end, I just kind of laughed, because I also don't think he'd read the book. He just was really aggressive and weird. And this is part of my life as a writer, means being criticized. And it's actually kind of a privilege, because it means that people are reading it and it's worth their time to even comment,
Yes. So, can you describe a particularly challenging story you have worked on and how you overcome any obstacles doing that?
Well, we could go back to that garment story that I wrote in Bangladesh. I hadn't written for many international newspapers before, and those girls were really scared to talk to me, to talk to Sherpa, the translator, because they were fearful that if they complained about their employer, they could lose their job. But they were also really angry, and they wanted to tell the world that they weren't being paid enough. So Sherpa and I went to the garment factories like late at night. We waited for them to finish working, and we didn't ask for their full names or anything, because we changed everybody's name. And, it was credit to Sherpa that he was very sympathetic and persuasive to quickly gain their trust. And then I interviewed like the garment workers union, who was really good. And I think I got some comments from the government department as well. And then for getting it, I wanted it to be published by The Independent in London. And at the same time, there were floods in Pakistan, and she didn't run it because she had to give priority. There was this terrible situation in Pakistan at the time. There's only limited space in the world pages. So then, instead of giving up, because I put so much work into it, I contacted the Scotland Herald. I think I asked friends to give me ideas, like, who can I send this to? And then the editor said yes. And I was just so happy that, because with a story, it starts with the idea. Then you have to get an editor to say yes to your idea. Then you have to get your sources to say yes. Then you have to deliver the article on time. And then the article has to be right for the magazine. So the right fit at the right time. There's not two articles that are the same, or something bigger happened that replaces it. So there's a lot of, maybes in journalism, which can make it exciting and exhilarating, and also sometimes heartbreaking.
So, how much time it takes to publish one article approximately?
Well, it depends. If it's a single source, like if it's a profile of someone and I'm just talking to them about like their life or their career, I can do that in a day. And that might be like 1,000 words, or even like 4 hours or something. But there's the time involved. Writing the questions takes quite a lot of time, because I have to learn all about them. Like, I have to ask questions that show that I have researched them and I'm interested in them. And because otherwise I won't get good answers, will I? So that can actually take quite a bit of time. And then I record the interview. So I use AI, and that simultaneously translates what they're saying. And then I get that document, and then I put it into a Word document, and I just kind of like craft it from there, and also do desk research as well. And sometimes that can take a really long time because you've got to get every single fact right and find like the correct link. And then sometimes the editor, like the BBC editors, they will come back and they want lots of information, and every single word is fact checked. So it's really, really rigorous.
So how do you do the research and fact check your work?
Well, so for the BBC, I can't just use a press release. I can't just, link a press release. I have to go to the actual scientific study and, check the findings against, if I've seen it in a newspaper article, I have to go to the scientific study and check that those two numbers match up, and then I can put it in. If I'm not 100% sure, then I can't use it. I just can't use it. But sometimes the really interesting stories, they're not online, so like in Myanmar, because they didn't really have the internet, I did a story on how old people are treated and like the health situation, and there's no aged care facilities. There was nothing. There was no information online. There was no data. And that happened all the time. I was trying to write stories on like the car manufacturing industry or the paint industry, and there was no information. So I would have to physically go to the offices of like the township authority or the industry association. And then sometimes they would give me, paper reports, and I would quote the person that I spoke to, who had a lot of that information in their mind.
I see. So how do you stay up to date with the latest news and trends in your industry?
Well, I'm kind of obsessed with it, so it's quite easy because it's just second nature. I don't really think twice about it. Like I never read fiction. I never really watch movies or anything. I'm just always watching the news. In the morning, I listen to the radio because I get a lot of story ideas from the radio. And then I'm reading throughout the course of the day, because as I'm getting my head around one topic, inevitably you'll stray into another topic, and then you'll learn a little bit about that. And, if I'm writing, the editors will give me questions and I have to find the answer. So that's the challenge, is finding a reputable source that can be trusted and making sure that it's up to date. Like if it's more than 2 years old, I can't really use that.
So can you describe about any notable milestone or achievement in your career?
Well, I mean, publishing my book was probably my biggest achievement. And I mean, I self-published that book because I couldn't find a publisher who was willing to back me. They thought not enough people were interested in Myanmar, and I didn't have a very big public profile to, write a memoir. So every time I've gotten a review in mainstream media, like I was on TV in New Zealand, I was on a breakfast show, and that was amazing because it was just my little self-published book. So that did make me feel good, because even though it made me feel bad that no publisher believed in me, readers have enjoyed the book. And when the reader tells me, that's great.
So during this entire journey of yours, you must have faced some ups and downs. So how did you overcome those obstacles?
Well, I mean, I did get really depressed in London. I was working on reception at a garbage company. I was earning very, very little money because it wasn't even full-time work. I was like a casual staff, and I was not going anywhere. My career was going nowhere. And I just imagined a life where like all my work life would be boring, and it wasn't, what I wanted to do. And I'd had all those boring jobs when I was a student. I'd done all those really junior admin type roles. And I had to really think, what am I prepared to do to make this happen? And that's when I thought, I'm going to go to Bangladesh. Also, I wanted to go to Bangladesh. I was really curious to go to Bangladesh. So it kind of ticked both boxes. But I had to decide, will I just accept a life in London where I'm poor and I don't enjoy my work, and that will be it? Maybe one day I'll get lucky, but that was all I knew. And I decided, no, I will end my life in London and I will moved to Bangladesh with no guarantee, but my plan was, if I do an internship for 6 months, then I come back to London. Maybe someone will give me a job because I will have worked in a newspaper for 6 months. So the plan initially was just go for 6 months and get that critical. They also offered to pay me. So, you know, I wasn't a charity case anymore. I was actually like being a paid journalist, which was amazing. So, and that was a risk that definitely paid off. But I was so depressed before I went to Bangladesh, and I thought I could never get a job.
So if you now look back in time, have you ever made any mistake that you would love that you didn't do it?
Well, one mistake I made was I have always loved books and writing, and I applied to get into a journalism university in Melbourne, where I went to school, and I sat the test and I wasn't accepted. And that I just gave up. I just gave up on journalism as a career because one university didn't accept me. So I never thought about it again. I went and studied for 6 years I loved my history, but I did not enjoy 1 minute of law with no idea what I wanted to do. Whereas why didn't I apply to more universities, or like just go and like knock on the door of a newspaper and say, can I be a student intern or something? But I just accepted that first no, which then cost me, like 7 years of my life doing something different, until I had to face the fact. People kept saying to me, why don't you be a journalist? Like, what happened was there was this army guy in Pakistan, and I was in the army museum, and we were having a cup of tea out the back because he invited me out the back, and we were talking, and he suddenly stopped me and said, are you a journalist? And I said, no. And he was like a bit suspicious, and he was like, but you asked so many questions. And so then I was like, oh, well, he thought I could be a journalist. Actually, maybe I could be a journalist. And then I decided I'm going to be a journalist.
Interesting. So, do you have any advice for aspiring journalists or writers?
Well, I think if you really want to do it, you just have to do it, because there's no way around it. You could spend half your career doing what you consider more sensible or more lucrative, or is what your parents want you to do, but you will end up a journalist or a writer if that's deeply, if it's part of your identity. You just can't really ignore that. And I've also seen a lot of people who thought they wanted to be journalists. They thought it was like an exciting career, and it turned out it's not very well paid. The hours can be really long and strange. It can be dangerous. You can get a lot of public criticism as well. So, I mean, it's fine to try it, but if you go into it for the wrong reasons, like thinking it's gonna be all glamorous and stuff, well, it just, I don't know, you might end up doing something different, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you so badly want to be a journalist, just don't let anybody tell you can't do it, because a lot of people will say, oh, everyone wants to write a book and they never do it, to kind of put you off. And you just have to ignore all of those voices and just keep focused.
Great. So we were listening about your work. We would also like to know, how are you in your family life, or in your personal life?
Well, Sherpa and I were together for 10 years, and we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, but almost 3 years ago, we separated after that time, after 10 years together. And I became a single parent with 2 children under the age of 2, and freelancing as a self-employed journalist and trying to write a book. And my youngest child was 9 weeks old. And all my family live far away. So my mom and my sisters and my dad and everything, they live in a different state. So I had a lot of challenges. Sherpa he's a great dad, and he looks after the girls, but they were such small babies that really it was mostly me, and it is still mostly me. And they're still only 2 and 4 years old. So I just have to be really disciplined. Like, as I said, I don't really get to watch movies or like just kind of hang around and like relax, I guess. But I love my work. I work 7 days a week because when they sleep on the weekends, I write my book because otherwise I'll never get to finish my second book. So I do work a lot, but because I love my work, I'm just really happy working all the time. So I exercise and I sleep well. I'm pretty healthy, but I'm either playing with my kids or writing. Or maybe seeing my friends sometimes. But there's a lot of work and being a mum.
So how it feels to be this productive?
I like it. I get a lot of satisfaction. I just, but I get really frustrated. I wish my second book was finished. It's taking me such a long time to write because I have a really limited amount of time. My day-to-day income is journalism, because you don't make a lot of money from books. So I have to concentrate on the well-paid work of journalism. And then in any spare time is when I can do the book. But I have to be patient. This book is going to be over 100,000 words. I've already written about 50,000, but it takes a long time. And I would love it to be ready for you to read now because that's the fun part. But,
Thank you so much, Jessica. We are at the very end of this session. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate your insights and expertise, and you are a really inspiring figure.
Oh, well, thanks for being interested to let me talk to you.
Thank you. So that's all from today. I hope our listeners have found this conversation as informative and valuable as I have. Thank you so much, Jessica. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.